All right, ready to go. So, Chris, you're up. So I don't know if you could just kind of give us highlights, we'll say, of the operating budget, and then we'll, although it didn't change a lot, then just look at your capital budget, and then we'll have whatever questions for you.
Sure, sure. To start, I just wanted to touch on, I guess first and foremost is when I started to develop this budget, we were still a little uncertain with the COVID and the things that were going to be affected by that. So when I presented this to the selectmen, you know, I tried to be a little frugal here and there, you know, to at least help put forth an effort to give you guys a decent budget. But in the meantime, of course, things have changed, and I believe they've changed a bit for the positive. So there are a few line items that we may need to look at and adjust again, even after my meeting with the selectmen. So we can discuss those throughout the conversation. I'm sure some of you may have questions about those very same line items. And quickly, they are the outside contractors line item, materials line item, and the waste disposal line item, which is really out of our control, even with regards to the COVID virus. So that one's going to bite us hard, unfortunately. So with that said, if anybody has any questions in particular about particular line items, I'd be more than happy to let you know the thought process and the means by which we got to that particular number. We can go through line by line if you like, or.
Hello, Chris. It's Tim Turan. I can imagine how difficult it is putting a lot of this work together, not knowing what the future will be. I was intrigued by a couple of things, and I'm sure it's just because it's my naivete on some of the items under labor and fuel versus road materials and repair. And I was just curious to understand how fuel and labor were up, but then the road materials and actually the work of doing the repair was down. And so I just didn't understand where what was contractual, what was reduction in work, and how they kind of tied.
Sure. In regards to the fuel, that's kind of directly related to we still have diesel vehicles, right. But we're switching to gasoline vehicles, and they use more fuel. We're using more gasoline. The diesel consumption stays about the same. Of course, we're subject to the market price we're paying for fuel, both gas and diesel. But we use a little bit more gas now, and it's also reflected in the ambulance company's purchase of a new gas vehicle. So that's bumped up a little bit, and the numbers are a little different. That's all that is. And the other, the materials line item, which I kind of mentioned in opening, I tried to reduce that a bit because I wasn't really sure where we were going to be, you know, who knows how tax revenues were going to be and all that stuff. It's kind of revealed itself that we're doing okay, or so I'm told. So again, that's a line item that I'm going to ask everybody to consider that we bump back up to last year's number. Especially after some conversations, we're going to try to bump up our production here in regards to road work. That's going to mean at least one, probably two contractors that we're going to be using, who are also going to be needing materials and supplies brought to them as well. So that's the materials is one that certainly we're going to have to look at a little bit harder and possibly adjust.
I think you'll be a hero to the townspeople.
I know, we can never go fast enough and hard enough, so we're trying.
Thank you.
Chris, this is Dave Challenger. What do you anticipate the change with outside contractors would be then?
Well, I went out and I asked for quotations to some local contractors. I got 2 response. I sent 3 out. I got 2 responses, 3 actually from another outside of town. And they came back pretty much equal. So, you know, I think we'll be comfortable using either one of those contractors to bolster our production a little bit and hopefully get a little bit more done and put some more smiles on people's face.
Right, and the $75,000 number in here is a good number for this year.
It's going to be the first year that we did this since I've been here. So I guess we'll work with it and we can, you know, kind of bolster it. We may have to bolster 1 or 2 line items with Town Aid Road, you know, provided that it's relevant to us fixing our roads. I also have, we're going to bump up our chip seal program, and we're going to try to get, I'm looking at 4 roads this year chip sealed. So, you know, we'll have to bolster those things with Town Aid Road money if it presents itself. We don't want to get, whereas we want to do more road work, be more productive. We don't want to get too far out in front of ourselves. Least of all, we'll have roads ready to be paved that won't get paved, if you follow me.
Yep, I think Town Aid Road is the place to use anything above anyway, versus increasing the operating budget, because like you said, maybe a program to catch up, and then it may be a little bit different. So I think to use that money, since it is available, makes sense, unless you think you need something here. But I think it's for any of the road stuff, and if it's related to something that's for bonding, then it would really come out of that fund also. If the contractor's doing something related to those roads that we bonded for, then it would get paid out of the bond funds instead of operating. And this would be just kind of like your other stuff that you need. So I think it could, like you said, be managed that way. So it's a good strategy. All right, and can you just give us a little bit? I know solid waste, you know, we don't set the price. We were told what the price is. Do you have an estimate of what's different than in this proposed budget for solid waste?
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna get every municipality that goes through Mira is gonna get a bump this year. And it's based on their rate increases. And just to kind of lay it out for you, over the 4 years that I've been here, 4 year plus, we've gone from about $70 a ton to $109 a ton, let's say $110 a ton. And based on our 4 year average of tonnage, which is, let's see, 1,147 tons. That's our 4 year average. That's since I've been keeping the records and submitting the reports to MIRA and the DEP. You know, that average number comes out to $125,000, $125,023 to be precise. However, last year we had a banner year at the transfer station as far as MSW. We had 1,348 tons, which at today's money, that $109 tipping fee, you would be at 146, almost $147,000. So, and these costs are going to be across the board. Eventually, we can anticipate that. But for now, for our budget purposes, we're looking at MSW. We're going to get it in demo. Recycling, which is unbeknownst to many people, is embedded in the MSW cost. People think recycling is free. It's not. There used to be some companies that made money from recycling. it's difficult. It's a difficult line to make money in now. But anyways, that fee is embedded in that $109 MSW tipping fee. So it's really not free. Anyways, you know, we should be, there's no way for us to anticipate how much MSW we can get. You have to be a mind reader to see what drives that. I don't know. Some years we have more, some years we have less. When I first got here, we were around 850 tons to 900 and change in tonnage, and now we're over again on a 4-year average 1,100 tons. So, you know, I know I've said this before to different folks, but moving forward, we're going to have to consider other options to bolster our transfer station. It's a big cost for the town to take, and you know, whether it's fees for transfer station passes or fees to throw as you go, you know, per bag after a certain amount of bags, you know, we'll have to consider those things. But that's what's driving that number. Can we anticipate that getting higher in the future? Yes. Should we? Yes. You know, the landfills that take MSW, of course, the burn plant is shutting down, which is driving this whole fiasco. We'll be shipping Connecticut trash to Ohio, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and as anyone can imagine, how could that be economical? Doesn't make sense. So a lot of moving parts on the MSW, demolition, recycling. You know, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And eventually you'll see the state and maybe the feds get involved with it. But until then, the cost is all ours.
Chris, this is Dave. A couple of years ago, we had an issue with like contractors bringing in large loads and dumping it. And this is just supposed to be residents only. Do we still have contractors coming in there? Have we cracked down on that?
You know, we make a little headway, and we turn some folks around. It's going to be a recurring issue. It's difficult when you're at that transfer station, especially on a busy Saturday. About this time, you know, folks start to get out and start doing things. Of course, we're checking for passes, and you know, everybody has passes, but you know, there are ways to get around all of what we do to limit contractors, to limit people without passes, you know, neighbors loaning neighbors vehicles, and so on and so forth. And again, moving backwards a little bit, if we're ever going to defray some of the costs of running that transfer station, and this would be a deterrent to some of those people that are getting around us, you know, we're going to need to charge by the yard, or so contractors bringing in large amounts of material, they're going to pay for it, and that's easy enough to do, and that'll hopefully make folks think twice about burdening the town of Haddam with what should be a business expense for their business. So it's tough. It's tough. As everybody knows, we don't have a constable or a police department. We rely on the Connecticut State Police. So if we do have an issue up there and the phone call goes out, you know, folks are going to be gone. And yeah, we can take down a plate number and pursue it after the fact, but it's a difficult task for those three guys down there, even in the best of circumstances.
I wonder, Chris, it's Tim Turan again. Two thoughts, and maybe one of them will, and they're different. Related to the contractors, does it make any sense for us, and maybe we have a sign there and I just don't see it, that violators will be fined? Can we work with the F troop or whatever to then, or whoever it is, to then, if we did take a plate down, to send them a fine in the same way that a camera takes a picture of your plate if you go through a toll and you don't have Easy Pass? I just don't know if there's anything like that that would be, and it would be significant enough that it might be deterrent just by seeing the sign.
Sure. I mean, if you've been up there lately, we have many, many signs. And in the end, to be quite honest with you, a sign is just a sign. Most people don't read them. But that doesn't stop. That's like a speed limit sign. It's there. You're supposed to go the speed limit. And when you tell the officer, I didn't see the sign, and he says, well, it doesn't matter. The sign's there and you were speeding. So yes, if we put a sign up that specifically said no contractors, we may already have one. I've ordered so many signs for the transfer station. I'm not sure.
In fairness, I see so many signs, to your point, that I just wondered if we did something like that and said that violators will be fined, and then we find one or two of them, that would spread the word that this is serious and not just merely, you know, my dog does bite sign on my lawn, so to speak.
Sure, but everybody needs to realize whereas Haddam's a small community, and some of those folks that take advantage of it are local folks. They are local folks.
Then the alternative, it seems to me the alternative then would be is we should probably, and maybe we've done this, and again, it's my naivete and newness, is maybe we need to revisit the cost of a sticker relative to, and just raise the sticker prices.
Yeah, I actually did a little calculation with the number of stickers that we distributed last year. Forgive me, I should remember it, but I don't. It's around 2,600, I think. And I believe that would bump the sticker price up to around $80 in that vicinity. If you divided it amongst those folks that are registered to use the transfer station, which some of them I'm sure are doing everything right and doing the things they should do. But if you would ask me how do we you know, slow that down, I would say you eliminate contractors, period, end of story. You know, business expense for them, they get a dumpster and they put it in a dumpster and they have it hauled for them. Direct business expense instead of passing it on to the town. You're going to get kickback. In the hot seat at the town hall there, that's you, Bob. He would certainly have visits from some folks.
As long as they don't go to his home.
My opinion, most folks will understand it, and the ones that are directly affected will get over it. So, I mean, that's for that discussion. I think is for another time and another committee probably. You know, we need to make some hard decisions up there if we're going to defray some of that cost.
Chris, do we know how other similar towns handle contractors? Do they have different permit that maybe costs, you know, $500 a year instead of, you know, 75?
Yeah, well, there are. Well, remember now, no matter how, unless you charge them $1,000, you know, to deter them from bringing excess to the transfer station, you're still going to get the same thing, and it's not going to cover our cost. It's still going to be cheaper for them to do that. Many municipalities, and I came from one before I worked here. You know, you have a chart, and if it's a pickup truck with demolition in it, and it's level to the bed rails and front to back for an 8-foot bed, it's X amount of yards, and you're paying X amount of dollars. Let's say $25. Fair. It's going to cover the cost to get rid of that. So again, that's probably a lengthy meeting and conversations to come up with something that's going to work for the town of Haddam, but that does work for other towns. Again, my recommendation would be just there are no contractors.
That would be
The downside using that approach, of course, you have to hire somebody to stand at the gate and check everybody in and charge them.
Yeah, it would take one of those guys to be in the shack full time. So, you know, folks would have less help on the line. And someone's going to say, well, we'll hire somebody else. Well, that's another expense. That's another half-time position. And, you know, vacation, so on and so forth. So, you know, it's not an easy task.
All right, so to get back to the budget number, we have 150 in there right now. That's your, just for solid waste disposal. So based upon what you said, that's a good number based upon current information.
Yeah, that should be a good number unless we go hog wild with MSW again, and I can't tell you that.
Right. Yeah, but at least we've addressed the price increase and it's at the estimates at the level of last year, like you said, whether it hits or not. So we're good to go with the 150. So the recycling, there's another 12,000 separate. But you kind of said it was in the other line. So what is this recycling line versus the other line?
Yeah, well, don't forget that we're encouraging people to recycle now, and as I said, that is built into that MSW price, and it's technically not part of what deep counts as MSW. They ask for a separate line for recycling. So regardless of whether how we're paying for it, we still have to haul it to the facility, the facility and dump the recycling. So we're encouraging folks to recycle, and we have increased our recycling. So in anticipation of doing exactly that, that's what that number is all about.
It's the transportation.
Correct. More trips.
Okay.
This is Dave again. I see there's a fairly large increase in the hazardous waste collection. Did something change on that line?
Yeah, again, we've seen a big increase in folks using hazardous waste. Not only when we have it scheduled, but Bunny and I field phone calls all the time down here. We're going to, anybody can go to any town with their hazardous waste. It's just more convenient for us to go to Essex when they have it there. But you can take it, you know, if they got one in Colchester, you can take it there and you just identify yourself as a Haddam resident and you drop that off and it goes on the Haddam, you know, the Haddam tally sheet. So we do have an increase in household hazardous waste.
Okay. Anything else significant? Those are the big changes that we didn't ask you about. You highlighted the three and we talked about those three at the beginning.
I've gotten a few questions in regards to, you know, the winter operations budget and our sand, kind of eliminated sand, but the salt and ice control. And we're at a level, I think, that, you know, I've been here long enough now that I think we're comfortable. You know, and I always ask everybody to remember that we could get a winter that, you know, we don't get much of anything last winter before this one. Or we could get a horrible winter where we're going to get blown away and again, fortunately for a fund like Town Aid Road, you could use that for winter operations and ice control on roads if we had to. Of course, that would take away from our construction season and road projects. So I think that's our comfort level for now, moving forward. And I hope it doesn't change much. Global warming, you know.
Everyone could be our friend.
All right. Any other questions on operating? So I guess capital, I don't think there was significant change. Just I guess you swapped out a truck. I don't know if you have anything you want to mention specifically on the capital budget.
No, I did not, and that.
Take that in the paving box was the other thing. I think that was a new item.
Yeah, and that was, you know, in hopes of us doing some of the what is not where we have a contractor come in and finish pave. Of course, that's what they do. They do that best. We do a lot of things great, but the paving box would help us with. For a good example, for all the folks who are unfortunate enough to have to drive over Little City at Gunga Hill on that little bumpy patch, that would give us the opportunity to run out there, take a day, run out there and other places, do a little shim paving, smooth that out for the winter until we can get to it in the road plan to take care of it properly. They would be Band-Aids. And of course, there are other projects that we do, time allowing, that, we could do a smaller road ourselves. Off of Ruddy Ferry, I always confuse it with a road on this side of town. Small road like that, where the road is, a small enough bite for us to complete it in a reasonable amount of time, things of that nature. That's what we would use that box for.
Yeah, this is Bob. Chris, we already have one, right? But we have access to one. It's Pete, so we've been doing things like that.
Yeah, we do not, nor did we ever have one. The town had what's called a drag box, which basically you dump your material in and you drag it. It's not a paving box. It doesn't do a good job. And that was probably old as I am. It's been scrapped, by the way, put in the scrap metal container. So the one that we do use is from one of Haddam's finest residents, Pete Santoro. Pete and I have had many conversations in regards to compensation for that, and he absolutely refuses to do that. So Pete's a great guy, and I certainly appreciate his big effort on to our benefit. But that can't go on forever. As hard as I'm trying to get Pete to stay for another 4 years, but I don't think he's going to stay that long. So I'm trying to set ourselves up for success after Pete's gone.
Yeah, this is Bob, and that was my point too. That this is not something brand new that we've never used before. We've been using one, but it's a borrowed one, and who knows how much longer we're going to be able to do that. So it's probably time that we bite the bullet and make the investment.
All right. Any other questions for Chris at this point? All right. Great. Thanks for taking time out, Chris, to go over this with us.
No problem.
Thanks, Chris.
All right. We'll do something more fun.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right. See you.
Take it easy, Chris.
Bye-bye.
So, Doug, are you on?
Kind of, and I was unable to, and then I had a little problem with the phone. I wrote the wrong access code down.
All right.
So I'm on. I got on about 5 minutes late.
Okay. That's no problem. We just got started, so you got here. So if you could kind of just give us an overview of the budget and the requests. I guess, the requests increased substantially from last year. You could just talk about that, and I think your proposed budget might be a good way to talk about how you got to the numbers, for your request this year, as far as, what your revenue estimates are, and then a little background on the ambulances, and we can roll into capital, because, we can see some big numbers spent under ambulance expenses from 19 and 20.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So our request, excuse me, this year is essentially doubled from last year. And a number of factors have gotten us there. We had a reduced call volume last year compared to the year before, which we attribute to the COVID pandemic. We started noticing probably in March or April we were getting fewer calls, and the calls we were getting, there were more people that were actually refusing transport. They were concerned about going to the hospital, and that was the biggest concern that we heard from patients throughout the year, actually. Our income for the year, well, in general, our income is delayed from the time that the transport actually occurs. There's about a 3-4 month lag on average, and sometimes it's longer. So we didn't see the drop in income right away. So when we look at the income for 2020, that reflects the call volumes of pre-pandemic in the first half of the year's income. And the second half of the year's income reflects the reduced call volume that we started noticing in March or April. But we didn't see the results of that until the summertime on our revenue side. We ran deficits every month between revenue and expenses. So when we projected this year's income, we really weren't sure how long the reduced call volume would last, and in addition, how long the increased rate of refusal would continue. The rate of refusal seems to be coming down. It was at one point, it was over 40%. It's down a little below 30% now. Still on the high side. The call volume goes up and down, but you know, as it would typically, but the overall numbers are still lower than usual. So we're still seeing reduced call volume, still seeing a certain number of people not electing transport. So that's one problem there, and our revenue comes from transport only. We can show up on a scene and help someone, treat them. If they decline transport, we can't bill for that. That's in state regulation and law. So we had a low projection on income for this year because we can't predict yet when we're going to see things get back to pre-pandemic levels. We don't know when that might happen. So we were conservative on the income side because of that. And also knowing that we're going to have a lag, we're going to continue to see a reduced monthly revenue right now, reflecting over the last few months, we're going to see that into the summer. Our expenses, however, don't go down. There are so the ambulance expenses. We ended up spending quite a bit of money over the last couple of years getting 2 new ambulances. We bought 1 new ambulance outright, and we remounted the box on the second ambulance, and that saved us a considerable amount of money over purchasing a new one. But we still spent between the 2 years about $140,000, a little over $140,000 to do that. We saved a lot of money because the new ambulance we bought was actually a van ambulance rather than a box. So we spent a lot less money on that. And on the box, again, the second ambulance, we remounted the box considerably less. But you know, we run a tight budget each year anyway. We run a little bit of a deficit each year anyway. And so we had been taking out of savings for a number of years now to balance the budget at the end of the year. But this past year with the pandemic hit us pretty hard. And then having to purchase the ambulances over the last 2 years was also a big expense, and got us to the position now where we really can't depend on the savings to take care of the shortfall in revenue at the end of the year. So that puts us in the position where we are, where we're a little bit concerned about savings right now. We don't want to dip into it because that money needs to be there, you know, for emergencies, cover the cost of building repairs. If there's the ambulance issue, we budgeted $20,000 this year for ambulance concerns, but you know, that's, you know, with us keeping our fingers crossed that we don't have a catastrophic event. That's one of the concerns every year. So that's where we are on the revenue and expense side. A couple of things to note. 2 years ago, we spent $360,000 on staffing with Emergency Resource Management. That's the staffing agency that we use. Many of you would be familiar with them from our meetings over past years where we've talked about Emergency Resource Management. Well, the $360,000 we spent 2 years ago is way too much. We had a goal last year of reducing that to $330,000. We actually did way better than we expected. We cut it down to $283,000 for our fiscal year, which is a calendar year 2020. So we cut it by about $80,000. We were very pleased with that, but we have to project this year going back up again to where did I put it?
320,000, I think, in there.
320, I believe. Yeah, I think that was it. Yes. The reason we had to do that is we have an increase from ERM for the contract for this year. The overall 6% increase in the hourly staffing plus an additional premium for a manager from ERM who is also riding on the ambulance. So if we kept our hours request, our shift request from ERM the same, we would go up to $320,000 this year, roughly. So it's still lower than 2 years ago, but it's too high for us. So we've our board of directors has been working on projects to reduce the expenses for those. We've changed our stipend plan for the volunteers, which we think will be more attractive. And we've done that twice over the last year and a half. And now this summer, our intention is to employ EMTs ourselves. We're going to start small, hiring between 2 and 4 part-time staff. We'll see how that goes. And then we'll move forward from there. But we expect it will save 20 to 25% per hour for the employees that we hire as our own employees versus using ERM for those same shifts. So that's one way we're looking to save money. The other thing is our volunteer numbers have increased. Our active volunteer roster, our overall volunteer roster is bigger, and our active volunteer roster has also grown. And there is a difference between the two because at any time we have people away at school or returning home from school. So we have Wesleyan students who volunteer with us and they leave around May. And then we have Haddam resident students who go away during the school year. And then we have a number of our active people are actually in training status. So we can't have them right now staff a regular crew, but it looks good for the future. If at least half of them stay with us, 6 months from now, then we're looking good. So that's a quick overview there. We don't project that we're going to need a new ambulance for at least another 8 years. So that we're hoping that doesn't become a necessary expense in the meantime, and that's why we only put 20,000 in that ambulance expense for 2021.
So
Service
Doug,
payments. I'm sorry.
so on that 20,000, is that really capital replacements? Like we talked about, we have you in the capital plan, so I wouldn't want to be doubling up. So
Right. So yes, the answer to your question is yes, because until my conversation with you yesterday, I was actually confused about that. We thought that as of 2 or 3 years ago, we were no longer in the capital plan because it wasn't funded, and that's why we ended up spending money out of our savings to replace ambulances. Let me just make sure I'm looking at the right page here, because what did I do? There we go. All right, I moved that paper, and so I've been kind of doing this from memory for the last few minutes because I buried the one paper I needed. So that ambulance expense is 20,000. Yeah, that is for future purchase. So that's a capital expense there.
Okay.
So yeah, if we were in the capital plan, right, and that's funded, then that's 20,000 that doesn't need to go into the budget there.
Right. I think that would be our plan, and you kind of answered the question, or I don't know if you had that capital sheet that I sent you, but
yeah,
it's an ambulance in 22, but you have that, so I changed that to 2030. That's the 8 years from now, or it should be 2029, 8 years from 21?
Yeah, so I would think that we should go 29 and then go out of maybe to 31 or 32 for the second one.
Okay.
And that we should be able to do that. This will also depend on what happens to the ambulance's call volume in the next couple of years, how we experience wear and tear on the vehicles. We went from vehicles that have diesel engines to both having gas engines now. So there may be an ambulance expense, not necessarily a capital expense, if we have to replace an engine in a vehicle sometime in the next 10 years. It is a possibility, but we are relatively low mileage on those vehicles, so annually, so it may not be an issue, but it remains to be seen how things pan out over the next 10 years.
Okay. And those structures, like when you bought the new ambulances, like, so you had a power loader system and the power loader structure, is that still something that you need short term? I mean, they were originally there for 22, or
So we wanted to get 2, but we put in for 1. We ended up purchasing 1 with one of the ambulances, but not with the other. We just couldn't afford it. So we'd like to keep that in the plan. And if that can be more of a short-term one, we could put that into the second ambulance a few years from now. The ambulance manufacturer, in fact, I was just talking with a rep from them the other day. The stretcher that was not replaced is 13 years old now. They, for the last few years, they've been pushing us to replace it, but our stretchers don't get as much use as a stretcher on a city ambulance somewhere. And we've been confident that with maintenance, we can keep those stretchers going a while, but we don't know how long they're going to continue to give us a maintenance plan on that stretcher because of its age. So at some point in the next few years, it probably will have to be replaced. When we do, we'll probably want to go with that power loader, which, you know, we'd probably have to estimate a little bit of a higher price than what I had put in the in that plan a few years ago. But we'd like to keep one in there.
Okay.
Likewise with the loop, the mechanical CPR device. So we bought one on our own. Ideally, we would have one in each ambulance, so that, you know, most of the calls are handled with whichever vehicle is first out. Occasionally, there is a second ambulance call while the first one is out. You know, would there be a cardiac arrest where we would need it on the second ambulance? Well, possibly. It's just as likely on any call, so it's just as likely on a second call as a first. It's just that we don't do as many second crew calls. So at some point, we'd like to put a second Lucas device in service. But that's a $16,000 item rather, and we actually bought a used refurbished one from the manufacturer, and that saved us a few $1,000s. And we could certainly look to do that again down the road if it's still available as refurbished. So, you know, we're looking for any ways that we can save money as we move forward.
Okay, so what's the new cost on that? 16,000? We have 30 in there now.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. So, you know, the 30 was for two.
I see. Okay.
And then we thought when I put those numbers down, 30 was a good number for two.
Okay.
When we went to purchase, it became 16,000. And so that's why we went with a refurbished one. So we could probably put a number of 15 or 16,000 in and anticipate maybe spending a little less if the refurbished models are available whenever it is that we go to purchase.
Okay, and the power loader system and the power stretcher, can you just tell me the difference? We have both. One's 10 grand more than the other. Do you need both for the new ambulance or what? I mean,
Yes.
Clarify.
So
I understand.
Yeah, for the second ambulance, we did not put a power loading system in, and we used the old stretcher. The old stretcher is not compatible with the power loading system. So we would have to purchase, if we got the power loader, we'd also have to purchase the new stretcher. And again, that's something that can probably wait 2, 3, or 4 years. However long we can continue to get a maintenance plan from Stryker for that older stretcher.
Okay, so there's two on the plan now. You only need one of each. Short.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Now, long term, 10 or 12 years from now, you know, it may turn out that a new power loader is needed for one of the vehicles way out then. But again, our vehicles are low call volume vehicles. So even though they would be older, they should still be in good shape. But, you know, can't necessarily predict that. But
right. All right. So
I think if we plan for one right now, we should be good.
Okay. All right, and the ambulance type for replacement, we have two on there now. One's at 150, one's at 190. Would they be the same, or are you going to the van ones, or do you want the two different kinds, or I guess what is the plan?
So we had traditionally had two of the box ambulances. We have one box and one van now. I like the van, and I think it's a good configuration for us to have one of each. the box is the more popular one with people, but the van replacement cost is much less. I would say that we'd want to plan, if we're talking 8 to 10 years from now, probably 100 to 120,000 would be a good place to start for replacing the van. The van can't be remounted. It's just a van that's made into an ambulance. So we're probably looking at 120,000 to replace it in 10 or 12 years, and maybe a little bit more. Hard to know. The box, if the box stays in good shape for the next decade, the chassis would have to be replaced, but there is a chance that it could be remounted again, and we'd have to plan about 150,000 to remount it. I'm looking out 10 years. It's really hard to know prices, but considering that new box ambulances are 200,000 plus now, we'd have to budget, if it had to be purchased new, we'd have to plan 250,000 for 10 years down the road.
Okay.
But if we're able to remount it, probably save 100,000.
Okay. All right. Good. So that helps you at least update this, and so when we look at capital, we have a better idea of timing and exactly what you need.
Right. Yeah. So some of these are hard to predict, as you can imagine.
It's just,
whether this box can be remounted or not is difficult to know. We've done one remount with it.
Yep, it's just a plan. That's why we update it every year, because you have better information. So we just need placeholders, and as you get closer, then the plan will get updated. So,
Okay.
So this works for what we're trying to accomplish. Again, that's why we send the forms out to you next year, and you'll know better how the ambulances are tracking and what's going on and what things look like as you get closer to needing it. But for now, at least we have it on the list. And so it's on our radar as far as our planning. Does anyone have any questions for Doug?
Yeah, sorry, Tim Turan here. Thanks for that great discussion and presentation. It really helps me understand more about both operating and capital. I have, just going back to the operating budget, a couple of observations. One is small, and then one is larger. And the smallest one has to do, and again, maybe I'm missing something, so let me apologize first for my naivete. But I look at your fundraising activities, and it looks like your fall fundraising letter is fantastic in generating, close to $20,000 thereabouts. But then I look at your spring fundraising, and your spring fundraising is $300 last year thereabouts, and you spent $2,300. Perhaps that spring fundraiser may not be so effective. It costs you more than you put in.
Right. So that is correct. That is netting less income for us. Let me grab my comparison here.
It's line 1250 and 6327.
Right. I was just looking at it too. Well, we have noticed that on the fall one, we generally do much better than on the spring one. It's almost a wash for the spring one. We've done better than that in the past, but it does cost us a certain amount to send that letter on. We got a lot less in revenue from that this past year. We've tried 2 a year for quite a while now, and we get really good response in the fall. And maybe we need to, our board needs to look at whether it's worthwhile to send the spring one out. And I think that's what you're asking, I believe, right?
Yeah, I mean, and maybe I'm missing something, but I look at January, December 20. and the fundraising income, which I assume is the spring because it's separate from the fall above, was $298, but I'm looking at the spring fundraising expense of $2,280, which would mean that you would actually have $2,000 less in expense if you didn't do it.
Right. Yeah, I see what. Yes, you're right there. So, you know, that's something that we should have paid a little better attention to. To be quite honest with you, we've generally done better on that, like I said, and it kind of surprised us that it was as low as it was on the income.
Worth discussion, I think, back at the ranch to see what you could do, either to make it work harder for you or try to do more in the fall to make the fall appeal bigger. But clearly, there's probably opportunity to make it work harder or not do it. The only thing I was wondering about, and again, we've discussed it, is I'm going back to kind of, what am I going back to? Going back to income from service payments. And you had a very cogent discussion earlier about the challenge with COVID and people refusing to be picked up. And we see the decline from 332 to 262,000. And so this year you're now forecasting 200,000, which is another decline of 60. Is there any reason to believe that the year could be worse than last year?
Well, yeah. So I think it might be better than what we're projecting, but I couldn't know that for sure. And here's why. So last year's income was a mix of what we would have expected for typical income and, excuse me a second, I'm in a meeting. Last year's income was a combination. The first half of the year was typical income. Second half of the year was income during the pandemic. So the decrease in potential income for this year is lower than what last year's total income reflects. It really depending on how long this reduced call volume continues, and how long the reduced transport volume, which is actually the more important number there, because that's the only thing we can bill for right now. Mm-hmm. And that's why that number is low. We really didn't want to see it that low, but we had to look at what the actual numbers coming in were, and project out from there. But like I was mentioning, the call volume itself is kind of going up and down right now. It's not consistently better, and the transport volume seems to be, or the transport percentage seems to be improving, which is a good sign. So that the main impact on that number is what we think is going to happen with COVID. The other thing that impacts that is who has insurance, and what kind of insurance they have. And our payer mix over the last few years has been consistent in that the percentage of folks with Medicare and Medicaid goes up a little bit. And the last couple of years, we've been at 67% of our transport volume is people with Medicare and Medicaid. And, you know, why is that important? It's because Medicare and Medicaid provide the lowest reimbursement levels for us. They come nowhere near the cost or the actual bill, and even further away from the actual cost to provide the transportation service cost. So, you know, our town is getting older, and we have to project going down the road a higher percentage of people having Medicare and Medicaid, and you know, that will only potentially decrease revenues in the future, this year included.
Thanks, Doug.
You're welcome. I'm hoping I can report a much better number next year. I'm really hoping that number comes up to 250 or better, but we just had to be conservative on that.
Good morning, Doug. This is Dave Challenger. First of all, I'm happy to hear about the increase in volunteers. This has been a consistent issue over the last few years, so that's great news that the volunteers are coming up. You talked about the reduced volume because of COVID. With all of the federal and state relief coming, the money that's coming for COVID, does any of that go to ambulance programs that have been impacted by the reduced volume?
As far as we know, none has been earmarked for the EMS agencies. So we're not expecting anything right now. We've looked for ways to get grants, and we actually tried to get a PPP loan. That was one of our goals this year. We ran into the problem that though we do have paid staff, they're not our employees, so we don't write the W-2s. So we couldn't use that funding or that expense to get the PPP loan, which would have become a grant. So that was a problem, and we're looking for other areas where we can get grant money, maybe for equipment or whatever. But the answer directly to your question is I'm not aware of any of that funding that's coming in that's earmarked specifically for ambulance services.
Thank you. That would have been helpful if it was.
Yeah, Dave, Doug, this is Bob. The guidance on that American Rescue Plan money is very high level right now, so it's hard to say exactly what we could use it for. And we're still waiting for the final guidance from Treasury, which will probably be another month before we get that. And then we can start to look at how much we're getting and how we potentially can employ it.
Well, there's some potential good news there.
This is Bob. Yeah, it's a lot of money, and for like hazardous duty pay, bonuses for first line workers, that's there. But other than that, it's really kind of mute as to exactly how we can spend it in this particular regard.
Thanks, Bob.
Any other questions for Doug? All right, great. Thanks, Doug, for coming to the meeting.
Oh, you're welcome.
Definitely that.
So, all right. Yeah, thank you very much. I was going to comment on something, but I realized I don't need to, so we should be good. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks. See ya. Okay. So the only other item was just we sent out the capital plan. I'll make some of those updates that we learned from Doug as far as the timing and what the ambulance needs, because what was on there was a couple of years ago. So if you just did high level, and we'll talk about this at the 19th. You know, anything in blue? You saw my coding is there were new items added, so they're shaded in blue. But a lot of the information is linked to 22 if it is requested. So we'll part of the ambulance will adjust that. So it's just for perspective. That's the kind of point. And once we get the rest of the budget done, what we'll do on the 19th, we'll finalize public works. I think the health insurance, the benefits function, and then we'll have a discussion on capital. So this is kind of what's been requested, and so everyone has that information for that discussion next week. And again, once I update this, I'll get it to Joanne, and she'll get it out to everyone updated. And then I said once we figure out what the rest of the budget is, and then we can make some decisions on capital. Does anyone have any questions at this point, or no? I don't.
Well, I guess, well, just to clarify, Joe, on the capital request, we'll have a more detailed discussion about the requests and what we have to offer and what makes sense and all that sort of good stuff on the 19th.
Right, because a lot of it, we're looking backwards of what number we want to put in the budget. So once we finish the rest of the budget, then we'll have that detailed discussion and hopefully approve that. That's a joint meeting with the selectmen, so we can all talk about it, and then ideally we'll be able to finalize it that night. Hopefully we'll have all the information we need. We'll make the final decisions on the budget and be able to get them.
Well, I mean, the only thing I would say, and again, maybe it is premature based on what we're going to do on the 19th. You obviously look at the request. There's one number that is bigger than all the rest. And there is no clear background on what we might do should we approve that request in terms of what will happen to that. I'm speaking specifically of the Rossi property, how it will be handled and managed. And so I think it would be difficult to have an informed conversation without more information.
Yep. No, I put it in there because that's the request and that's the projected timing, but that specific item has a whole lot of other hoops to go through with town meeting and et cetera. So it probably wouldn't necessarily be funded, at that meeting. So, I mean, we can push it out. If you look at the total at the bottom, I kind of subtract it and say, here's the request.
I just was skimming through it saying, gee, that's I always look for the largest numbers to say, okay, what are we going to invest in capital? So that's the one that stood out. And I felt like, gee, I'm somewhat at a loss for saying how I could even judge that being a good or a bad idea, because I don't know that we've even discussed. There have been many discussions, obviously, about it. It is certainly a topical conversation piece, but I don't know that we've landed on. So, with good faith, how could we approve it? And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying I don't know enough to know what I don't know.
Yeah, like I said, that's going to have to go through town meeting and public hearing. So it's really just because that's the timing of the request that it's there. It's not something that we would actually approve as part of the operating budget.
Okay.
Or the capital budget, I mean.
Got it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Lundgren. Hello? Yes.
Hello?
In the same vein as Tim, I would hope that everyone would have a chance to drive around, including the back of Station 2, prior to the discussion of spending $200,000 on it. And this might be an opportunity to, between now and the next meeting, to do it. I drove by there this morning just to make sure in my own mind, and I have some serious misgivings about that 200,000. Thank you.
Yep, that's for the discussion on Monday, because this is just a workshop. But yes, that everyone wants to do that to have more information on it. But yeah, all of it's open for discussion. Again, this is just the request, and the other requested it, and this is the document. So there's nothing about this that's final. It's just information right now.
Yeah, great. And Mark, you make a good point. We should all take a drive.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? All right. Good. Like I said, I'll get this updated with the information we have. I have one or two other questions for Bob at some point to clarify one or two things, and then we'll have it ready to talk about on the 19th.
Thank you, Joe. This has been a very good workshop. I think a lot of things became clearer. So I want to say thanks.
Sure. I'm glad it was a productive time, because it is Saturday morning.
All right, everybody out to their yard.
Before everyone jumps off, if I can just take a minute, you'll see Ann Harder is on the call. She's our new
Yes.
finance director.
Yes, yes.
So you'll be
Hello.
seeing lots of her, and unfortunately for her, she'll see lots of us, but.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry I jumped on late. I got my vaccine this morning, first one. So.
Good.
But that was a good reason to miss. So
Maybe we can all start meeting in person.
yes, pretty soon.
Yes.
So,
Welcome, man.
but thank you. I'm happy to be here. Look forward to working with everyone. Been a great first week.
Great.
I've been happy every day that she's come back.
We're on a roll.
We're on a roll.
We're 5 for 5. Let's not mess this one up.
At this point in time, we go work in our yards, but don't bring too much waste to the transfer station.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for taking time, and we'll talk to everybody in a week.
Have a great weekend. all.
Sounds
All
good.
right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good weekend.